Dearinger here again with our study in Psalms, and we're continuing in Psalm 24. This would be part 3, and I would greet you again and pray and trust that God's grace, His peace, His mercy are becoming more and more real to you as we deal with this new world that we live in. I don't know if things are going to ever get back to what we would call normal, but God's the same. He doesn't change, and He still has us in His care, and that's an encouraging thing for me, and I hope it is for you as well. Last week we talked about, in verses 3 and 4, about what it means to have clean hands and a pure heart, and who can ascend into the hill of the Lord. And the person that can be in God's presence, who has clean hands and a pure heart, has everything to do with a heart attitude, a heart after God. It has very little to do with the going through the motions and doing the technical, the legalistic things that some people seem to think makes them right with God. It's all about the heart. And David continues here in verses 5 and 6, and he says, after talking about who has clean hands and a pure heart, and some of the things that a person with a pure heart avoids. And he says, this kind of person, he shall receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. He goes on and says, this is Jacob, the generation of those who seek him, who seek your face. And we'll talk about that in a moment, but what does it mean when David says that the person who has clean hands and a pure heart, he shall receive blessing from the Lord? And I think it has probably not a lot to do with material things, financial things, those kinds of things. That may be. God does bless us, and it's cool when He does that. But I think from the context here, we know He's talking about the things that matter, the things that are eternal. And for me, it's a closer walk. It's sensing His closeness, that when I spend time with Him, that there's just this presence, this closeness, that I can hear Him, and not necessarily audibly, although there's been times when I can't say that He talked like I am, but it was so clear and so plain that it was just about the same thing. And having this peace and this joy, this building this trust in Him, that life hasn't been easy in some ways for me lately, and for some of the people that I know, it's been very hard, and the challenges are very real. But knowing that we can be at peace with Him, we can trust Him, those are the blessings, I think, that David's talking about here. And I think David, as we've looked at what's gone on in his life, he was going through a similar thing. He was learning that he can trust God, that he doesn't have to try to do it all on his own or by himself. And it comes back, and it just seems like it's a recurring theme that God brings to us here, this thing of the heart attitude and what that means, and this thing of righteousness from the God of our salvation. David understood that. It just settled into him, and it settles into me more and more. I've been walking with the Lord for a long time now. Well, some of you have been walking a lot longer, but for 40 years. And this thing of righteousness, the price that Jesus Christ paid so that God can see me as righteous, my salvation, the price that was paid, the value of it. And this is not rocket science or something that you haven't heard or probably don't know, but just kind of the wonder of it to me is settling in more and more. Maybe it's because I'm getting older and the end of the journey is closer than the beginning now. I don't know, but it's cool how God is just revealing himself more and more. And in verse 6, he's talking about Israel when he speaks of, this is Jacob, the generation of those who seek him, who seek your face. And David obviously was speaking way back those many thousands of years ago. And God there was a continuing saga of him dealing with his chosen people. And David speaking there of those who recognize that God isn't looking for people who just go through the motions, who just do the sacrifice, celebrate this feast, this festival, wash their hands, eat this, don't eat that. Those are things God asks his people to do, and he asks us to do things as well. But David is referring to here is those, as David did, who have a heart after God. They do the things he asks them to do. We do the things God asks us to do. But our heart is after him. And that's what pleases God. And that's what he's talking about, is this generation. And it's cool how God ties his word together in not just the study here, but on Wednesday night, I'm teaching out of the book of Romans, and in chapters 10 and 11, Paul's been talking about Israel and how hard-hearted and how they went through the motions and their heart was not after God and they missed their Messiah, and everything that he told them through his prophets was a stumbling block to them because they just couldn't accept that. And it's a similar thing here. It's hard-hearted people. Then, in David's time, in our time, they think they can be good enough. Well, my goods outweigh my bads. Doesn't work that way. There's no karma chips. What it comes down to is your heart after God. And is it after God enough to seek him, to find out who he is, to receive him, to accept him? That's what's going on here. That's what David's talking about in his day, and that's what I'm talking about in our day. We will continue next week in verses 7 and 8, and I would again say, God bless and take care.